Hey everybody, it's Master Jace, Jason Jeffries. Um, I had to take down my one video of there because my hypothesis didn't match what the paperwork said, and what we what it still could make sense because the car behind him had the ballistic tip, but it seems like there's a lot of foul play involved with that. But the paperwork itself states that the shot came from before him, in front of him. There's a bullet hole in the windshield, hit him in the throat, which they explained away as the exit wound from the 308 that actually hit the governor, went through the Kennedy's right hand, right hand, and then hit the governor in front of him, and then tumbled out of the governor on to the gurney, which they were hauling him away with. I wanted to share just one last video on this, and basically, share some opinions and some facts that we have. They pertain to Hitler, JFK, and the new release of these last 200 pages that came out last night. It's basically, it's clear to everyone that America's lost its way. Liberals blame conservatives, conservatives blame liberals, the left wing and the right wing. But the truth behind it is the shadow government controls both sides, both wings. So it's a pull to control the middle. The fascism, basically, the fascists control both sides, if you will, and JFK was the most educated. He's the most educated president that we've had, in my opinion, and even wrote books on how the socialists came to power and still were in power after World War II and what led up to World War II. He wrote a book called Why England Slept, and it pulled apart the circumstances that led up to Hitler and the Nazis and how it led to World War II. And basically, he understood a lot deeper than most people and a lot more politicians that did at the time, especially the steps that took the power that grew the national security state basically into this controlled system that we're in now. In 1962, he passed the Kennedy Tax Act, which closed tax loopholes. He basically shut down a lot of the multinational corporations that were double taxing and making money off of money, if you will, kind of like the Federal Reserve. He was going to pull us from Vietnam, and also was trying to pull the power from the Federal Reserve System. He went as far as to issue $6 billion in non-taxable, non-interest dependent loan to non-interest based currency to the Treasury Department instead of going through the Federal Reserve System. And that in its whole was what led up to his assassination, period. And that explains why the military, the mafia, the lettered agencies, and everything, even after all the leaders are dead and gone, still have the power to cover up this information today. So the plan to take over the U.S. was started with a multi-step plan, basically. They had to first take over the American economy, which was accomplished in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act, which was the very thing that Thomas Jefferson warned us about, because the federal bankers took over control of the money supply, plain and simple. And after World War II, it was called the contingencies of the war security or war state, and basically it created what's now called the National Security State, which started with Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip, which they basically enrolled a bunch of Nazis into our space program and into our military-industrial complex, which at the time were war criminals, so they knew they had them under their thumb and under their power of control. So basically, when we started accepting Nazi technology, we started accepting their ideology as well. And by that time, Bush was president, and it led up to the Cheney-Rumsfeld, where this national security state was consolidated basically into what we see now, where the checks and balances are gone, and it eroded it into a completely fascist state. So kind of like fascism kind of means like when you take state governments and corporate power and you combine them together, and it's just not a pretty outcome. And since Lyndon B. Johnson was next in line, if you say, and JFK couldn't be bought, then that was their next option. And after them came Nixon, which allegedly was put into power with Nazi money. And then we get George Herbert Walker Bush, which was the son of Prescott Bush, which he was prosecuted in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemies Act for handling money for the Nazis, who sat on the board of America's, I can't remember the name, steamship line, basically, which was basically a big way for Nazi spies and saboteurs propaganda to get into the United States at the time. And once they got into power, they started to push for neoconservatism, basically another word for National Socialists. And if you look up the Northwood documents, which come around 1962, there was a plan to plant bombs in American cities and target American citizens for assassination, basically. Hijack ships, planes, and blame it all on Castro and the Cubans. You can look all this up. It's called the Northwood documents, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff actually signed it in, but JFK was the one who put a stop to it, saying, we don't do this, we don't act this way, this is un-American. And they even fired a general at the time who ordered the documents to be destroyed, but one copy of the document survived and is still obtainable online today. And then in the 90s, because of the Oliver Stone movie about the JFK assassination, they had a review board on it because the public really wanted to know what happened. And it basically lifted the veil for this national security state and basically the plan of these National Socialists, this Nazi party. And anybody who's studied American history after the 50s, basically from the day Diaz died, I think, was it November 22nd, 1963, America's lost everything. It's faith, credibility, its prestige, and everything. Everything's went downward since then. He was probably the last truly elected president for a long time. It really marks the time that the shadow government felt like they had enough power to pull off this power grab and start to control the United States. Until finally it's just become so blatant and obvious and in your face that almost everybody is awakened to it, and they realize that it's just here to destroy this democratic republic of the United States. They're trying to destroy our freedoms. It's to the point where people don't even want to vote because they feel like no matter what, the globalists, this fascist state, this national conservative or national socialist conservative fucking, don't matter which way you vote, liberal or conservative or, left, right wing, it doesn't matter because it feels like both sides are puppets. But it seemed to change with Trump. It really has. I feel like he couldn't be bought. He had enough money to fund himself. And for some reason, because he knew how to play the game, he got himself into office. And he probably released these files to share the fact that he could be next, almost, maybe to bring awareness to the situation. And no matter what way you look at it, it's time for people of every race, creed, religion, gender, everything to stop dividing, stop worrying about this and that, but point the finger at the people that are manipulating and controlling our history, basically, controlling our country and controlling the world in turn. It's these corporations that can buy our politicians, America essentially is a business, and it's came to a very ugly state. No matter whose theory, this, that, or the other, all of them point to the same thing. And the papers released show that he was murdered. As I said, it seemed really fishy that they wanted to point, the finger at the patsy, the fall guy, but he didn't make the kill shot. But if you really consider what was going on, he probably, just the consideration of people smelling gunpowder, people seeing muzzle flash, people seeing a man with a rifle in the car behind him, them pulling out 40 to 50 bullet fragments out of his head, them taking the president out of the hospital in Dallas, Texas, to Bethesda, Maryland, and then doing a false autopsy, the doctors having to put fake Full Metal Jacket bullet fragments, tape it to the skull so it would show up in x-rays, the skull being pieced back together in that illegal autopsy to make it look completely different when we can clearly see the whole top of his skull peel off and flop open. But the only thing that doesn't get me is, all right, if he was shot from above, from the bridge, the overpass in front of him, then why would the entrance wound be in the throat through a windshield and come out the top of the skull? I understand a ballistic tip, but a ballistic tip you'd think would shatter hitting the glass, first of all. Especially in a car like that, it should have been bulletproof glass, even though, yes, the top was down as a convertible. Nonetheless, it still should have had bulletproof glass unless they switched the car out. But if you really consider everything, the angle, the trajectory of it, when his head was turned like that, it seemed like it came from the back, but you see him jerk back. So, no matter what, a lot of it, the water is so muddy, but the paperwork says that the Surgeon General said he was hit, the entrance wound was in his throat above his Adam apple, and it came out the top, or blew out the top of his head. So if it hit in his throat at an angle, it could have very easily, I suppose, if it was a ballistic tip, maybe after it hit the glass, tumbled upward, or it hit the vertebrae and just shattered then. And that's why they pulled out 40 or 50 pieces of bullet fragments, because it was a ballistic tip. It wasn't a Full Metal Jacket that struck him from behind and hit the governor. So, it all makes sense up to the point where you just look at the trajectory, but they could have easily falsely triangulated it and placed blame where they, in the opposite direction, kind of like, look over here when the real stuff's over here. So I wanted to share the couple pages of documents that are really mind-blowing to me that I found online this morning, and I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So here's the one I shared from the earlier video. It says, the Surgeon General's report on the assassination stated the first bullet entered the president's throat below the Adam's apple, clearly showing that two persons were involved with the first shot being fired from the bridge across the parkway in front of the car. To further substantiate this, Petito said there was a bullet hole in the windshield of the president's car. Now that very well could have been the Full Metal Jacket. That could have been the Full Metal Jacket that pierced him and hit him from in front, and then the ballistic tip could have very well still came from the car behind him, as I stated in that earlier video. I took the video down because I didn't want to cause too much confusion. People were taking the mixture of the documentaries and stuff. They're taking and kind of placing words in my mouth when I said that. When I shared my opinion, if you will, it appears that the kill shot, now we're talking about multiple shots, the kill shot, it appears, literally came from in front because the back of his head blew out. His head jerked back. But nonetheless, the Full Metal Jacket had to come from behind that hit him in the throat. That's why everybody thought the throat wound was the Adam's apple. The wound on his neck was the actual Full Metal Jacket that pierced him, hit his hand, went through the car seat, and hit the governor in the chest, in the back, and then came out his chest. But, well, rolled out onto the gurney anyways. But if you really consider all that, all the information, it's crazy, it's a lot to take in. And I didn't want to muddy the waters or people to misinterpret me, so I just kind of deleted the video, took it off there, and I figured I'd clear up any statements I could. But the documentary that I was sharing a lot of the stuff from was called JFK, the Smoking Gun. And I have one more page I want to share with you guys. Here's the paragraph that I was just reading to you so you guys can read it for yourself. Go ahead and pause it if you'd like to read it. And let me share one more with you. So it says, Similotes 3s, I'm guessing that's a code name for an agent, friend stated that during the latter part of September 1955, a Philip Citrione, former German SS trooper, stated to him confidentially that Adolf Hitler is still alive, claimed to have been contacted by Hitler once a month in Colombia on his trip from Maracaibo to the country as an employee of KNSM Royal Dutch Shipping Company in Maracaibo. Citrione indicated that Similotes 3's friend took a picture with Hitler not too long ago, but did not show the photograph. He also stated that Hitler left Colombia from Argentina in 1955, and commented inasmuch as 10 years have passed since World War II, and the Allies could no longer prosecute Hitler as a war criminal. On the 26th of September 1955, a friend's obtained the photograph with Citrione referred to. On 29th of September 1955, the photo was showed to this agent for purposes of getting his reaction to the possible veracity and fantastic story. Obviously, was not in any position to make comments. Nonetheless, he borrowed the photograph long enough so that the station could take any action deemed advisable. Photostats of the picture were taken and were being forwarded. The photograph was returned to its owner the following day. The person to the left is allegedly to be Citrione, and the person to the right is undoubtedly the person which Citrione claims is Hitler. The backside of the photograph contained the following data: Adolf, Citritomare, Tunga, Colombia, 1954. And they have the photo attached, which I'll share. Okay, apparently I can't show that without breaking some copyright rules and laws, so I'm going to just go ahead and tell you guys just to look up that information and view it for yourself. It very much looked like him. This is from the JFK files, so it's even funnier that it's in there. And it also ties into, if you start reading through the JFK files, it actually proves that they were trying to sabotage planes, parts, and stuff from airports and ships and make it look like the Cuban government at the time, make it look like Castro. Because Cuba is still one of the only ones that wasn't a part of the Federal Reserve System. So, and right before 9/11, there was a few countries that didn't have a Federal Reserve Bank, basically. Iraq, Afghanistan, North Korea, and Libya. I may have left out one or two, but I know those ones for sure. And in 2001, the United States invaded Afghanistan. In 2003, by presidential decree, Afghanistan has a modern central bank, just like the rest of us. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. In early 2004, the Central Bank of Iraq was established to manage Iraqi currency. And in 2011, the United States bombed the living daylights out of Libya. And that's when Gaddafi was, before Gaddafi was overthrown. And we helped them establish a new central bank of Libya and form a new national oil company. So Cuba as well, they had no national bank. And you consider North Korea. Now, these names should sound familiar to you, that we went to war with them, we attacked them, we hated them, or we went buddy-buddy with them. And most of the time, it's pretty obvious what the agenda is. We want to get them into the Federal Reserve System. And then the Federal Reserve Bank controls all the money, they control the economy, and then once you control the economy, you control the world. End of point. You have one world government controlled by private corporations and families for the point of making money off interest, off, money off of interest, basically. So you just say your country, you want to make $1. You print off $1 or whatever your form of money is, and you come to me and say, we'd like to make money for our country. So I'm the Federal Reserve Bank. I say, okay, you owe us $1.25, but you only have $1 in existence. So there's that 25% interest that's always there, and you want to pay us off. So you say, well, I want to print a quarter to go with that $1, so I have $1.25. And they're like, okay, well, then now you owe us $1.45. So you're always going to be in interest and in debt to this system. It's a complete trap to keep people in control. And one day they'll be able to call out what's called sovereign debt, because you can't pay the debt because it's impossible to pay. And then they will take away your property, which sovereign debt is. They will actually take the country, complete a globalized agenda, and keep the New World Order. This whole thing is very blatant if you just open your eyes. And I hope more and more of us are starting to see this and are waking up to this. It's just mind-blowing when if you don't see the coincidence between these countries that I've named and the news today, or national history, or just the outlook people get on Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea. If you think of them, in reality, doesn't it seem like they're the underdogs? Or if they're the ones that are really fighting it, they're the real rebels that are actually trying to fight against this world domination. If you guys can't see the facts of the matter, that they stood up to this, it's the idea that we've been brainwashed through propaganda to think these people are all evil, then, that's part of the problem. But, hopefully you guys can connect the dots, and, maybe you'll help me learn more, and I'll help you guys learn more. But everybody stay safe, and I hope you guys enjoyed the show.